As you can see, this image looks a bit different right now, and that's why I would like to talk a little bit about this before we go to our next step, which will be in this lesson. But before that, I want to tell you a few minutes a bit about frequency separation to make sure in the future you will do everything right. I showed you really a lot of techniques, and I feel I even out a little bit too much, so I decided to correct this a little bit, because I removed too many shadows, and it's very important thing that there is different beauty standards, which I reply very often, but your image might look not always that great if you remove all of the shadows. If your image will look too perfect, it's going to be too flat, and it will be just difficult to fix it in the future. You can do this using dodge and burn. There will be a lot of dodging and burning, but it might be difficult. So it's better to leave some imperfections at this level, so you can correct these imperfections later, then remove all of the imperfections and go back, and you cannot go back to this point anymore. So that's why I decided to do this. I decided to keep the shadows over here, which are pretty nice, so I think they're going to stay with us till the end. And the one more thing I would like to talk about this wrinkle. Actually, I was thinking a lot. I showed you how to remove this, but I was thinking a lot if I should remove this or I should keep this. And that's another thing that you should know for the future, that we not always should remove the wrinkles. Sometimes they give a character to the model, and sometimes the model is a bit older, so when we're going to remove the wrinkle, it's just going to look fake. We don't want this for sure, so remember this. There's not always the need to remove the wrinkle and to remove imperfections. You have to remember that blemish is not always imperfection. The wrinkle is not always imperfection. So that's very important thing in the beauty retouch. Also, it depends for which purpose you're doing the retouch. Of course, if you're going to do jewelry or something like this, the image has to be perfect. If you do this for magazine, it's good to keep some imperfections. So there's always few differences. Why I decided to finally remove this wrinkle to keep this as it is, because this wrinkle was just ugly and I don't like this shape, so there would be a lot of work, so I feel it looks better without it. And right now the image is something I'm really happy about, and there's still a lot of work to do with dodge and burn a bit later, but as I said, it's good to leave some of the subject for dodge and burn. And what I'd like to talk right now is this pores over here, and it happens very often when we have this kind of makeup. I can zoom this out. We have a lot of these tiny shiny white dots, and for sure you have to say it's not always look like. From the distance we cannot notice it, but sometimes when we're going to print this, it will be visible and it doesn't look so great. So I believe the better way to do this is just to remove this or try to even out the skin in this place a little bit. So what I'm going to do above this frequency separation, I'm going to create a stamp, and I'm going to call this sharpen, and then I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this blur. Maybe it's not really blur, but I cannot find the better description for it, so let's stay like this. And for the sharpen, of course, we need to sharpen this area, but at first let me zoom this quite much to make this visible. And I'm going to filter, sharpen, and unsharp mask. So let me tell you a few things. First of all, it's amount. So it's our amount of sharpen, and it's going to stay at 100% because we want to keep this sharpen. And here is the other thing. Radius is the value of the sharpen. So we're going to set radius at 131 pixels, and it's going to build the sharpen around every this 131 pixels. So we cannot see the single dots, but it's going to build them sharpening around really huge areas. When I'm going to pull down the radius, it's going to build the sharpen, build the contrast actually between this little single pixel, so we cannot see the difference. When we pull the radius really high, it builds the contrast, it builds the sharpen around huge areas, so we cannot see the single dots anymore, but we actually see it sharpening really massive areas, as you can see. So as I want to sharpen only the single dots, I have to find the point like really low, and I believe the radius will be between 2 and 3 pixels. It's quite suitable. I find it suitable for me. Of course, you have to remember that for each image the values will be different. It depends on the size of your image, so don't try to copy me exactly. And about threshold, threshold is all about the difference. When we pull the threshold into the 0, as you can see, it builds the sharpen everywhere, because it has to build everywhere. That's the threshold. There's no difference, build the contrast everywhere. However, when we pull up the threshold, the information is only to keep the sharpen between the areas that there is huge difference. So there's huge difference between this black area over here and between this one, so we can see the difference. But in the areas when there is not such a huge difference in color, it's not building the sharpen. So in the threshold, I want to get to the point where it's going to even out the areas around, when it's not going to sharpen the right skin, which I want to keep, but when it's going to keep just the white dots. It's very important, the white dots has to stay visible for me. And I think it will be maybe around this level or even lower. Have a look. It sharpened the white dots really nicely, but the rest seems to stay the same. I maybe put the threshold even lower. And maybe I think even radius could be at 3 pixels, because I don't want to do this too soft. I want to make this visible for you, to make you see the difference. So now okay, and now I'm going to this blur layer. I'm going to image, apply image, so it's happening exactly the same what in frequency separation. Layer is as a sharpen, blending, add scale to offset 0, and this invert box checked. And you can really see right now that we can notice all of the dots. It's a good sign. If you see the little pores, it's a good sign for the future of our result. And change blending mode from normal to vivid light. And then you can remove this sharpen layer. The effect I've got, it's really strong, because I really wanted you to see the result. If I would keep this at 2.5, it would be really suitable, but maybe you wouldn't see it. And this 3 pixels is really perfect. Maybe 2.7 would be even better, but it's okay, because if it's too strong, we can always pull down a little bit of opacity. So instead of changing everything right now, I'm just going to pull down a little bit of opacity. I remove this sharpen layer, and on this blur layer, I'm going to call this pores. I'm going to create layer mask, and I'm going to invert this layer mask. So it's our previous result, it's our previous effect, how it looked like. Now I'm going to choose a brush, and with white color of the brush, I'm going to paint on this area. I want to even out the pores with white color, of course, because we just covered this black layer mask, so everything what's invisible from this layer will become visible right now. So paint on the areas. We want to remove the pores. It's only this area. I don't see more areas on this image. I want to do this. Of course, I don't want to affect the areas like the eye, etc. Here we have some really ugly color. It can help with it. So if you find some areas more, you can do this. Of course, for different areas, there might be different values, but for this area around the eye, everything was very similar, so it will work really great for us. A bit bigger brush, and just going to paint over here, so I will be sure that effect is applied. Let's have a closer look before, after. And you have to say, this method is really amazing to do such a thing. So we are pretty much done with our basic skin correction. Right now I'm going to select all of these layers and Control or Command G to put everything into the group, and this group I'm going to call correct.